Hi, I'm Ems, aka on Deck and Wings. In this video I'll be sharing with you some unconventional hobby tools I like to use. Most of these things you'll probably already have lying around the house, or you can pick up cheap from most supermarkets and stores online. And they've surprisingly changed the hobby for me for the better. First up I have a hairdryer. Using one of these will massively speed up the time when it comes to painting your miniatures, whether you're batch painting or painting more refined stuff. It's worth just getting a cheap one of these or seeing if you have a spare one around the house you can use. You might have used one before and not liked it, but the trick with it is to put it on the lowest heat possible. Also, don't put any of the attachments on it, they're not needed. Make sure you have a decent distance away from the model so you don't melt it or the paint. Make sure you're moving the hairdryer around and the model as well. This will stop the model getting too hot. And if you find your paint flying everywhere, you've probably put way too much on the model. I found that this has massively improved my painting because I don't have to wait as long in between drying times, and it's improved my overall painting because the layers have dried properly in between painting them. It's especially good, like I said, for batch painting, and also if you're trying to glaze or do more refined painting, it just speeds that up as well. Make sure the model you're holding and drying is going to be secured down properly, and any bits on your desk aren't going to fly off anywhere. Which moves me on to my next tool, which are hobby holders. There's nothing wrong with the pre-bought ones. I have a couple of them myself, and I really like the Games Workshop ones because you can hold them like a cognac glass. The other thing is these can get expensive and cumbersome if you're batch painting. You can easily make your own holders then if you want to, so if you have a plastic container like this, so this had gum inside, or if you have a piece of cork or some blocks of wood, and you can secure your models down with blue tack or double-sided sticky tape. My favourite at the moment are using shot glasses. The reason is these are inexpensive to get, and you can stack them on top of each other when you're done, so you can save space. This is something I learned from James at Siege Studios. I just really like using these as they take up less room and they're just easy to get. They're also very helpful for painting things in sub-assembly, which moves me on to a slightly other point as well. So I know Games Workshop and some companies sell these parts if you're painting smaller bits like this. However, you can just cut up some old sprues and glue them on the bottom, or if you want to, drill a hole in the bottom of it and then put the piece on. These shot glasses are great as well because they're clear, so you can decanter your paint into it and add your mediums before you use an airbrush, so you can see how thick or how thin it is. Speaking of decantering paints, we're moving on to our next tool here, which is a condiment bottle. You can get smaller bottles as well if you want to, but these ketchup type ones are great. Basically, I use these when I want to have a pre-done mixture of a certain type of paint. Inside this I have a mix of Uriel Yellow and Imperial Fist Yellow, which I use for my Lamenter's army. This will make sure you have the right mix every time. I also recommend putting some Lamium or thinning medium into this. You want to use at least 2 parts of each paint you'll be mixing together, just so you have a consistency throughout the colours. Next up I have this fidget popper thing. You've probably seen these about. I know some hobby companies have been selling these overpriced, but you can get them in loads of places and online. And these are great as a dry palette, so for washes and speed paints, etc. I found when using these that my paint stays moister longer, and even overnight it's still been wet. They're also super easy to clean, so once the paint dries up, you can just pop it out from the back. And it's quite fun and satisfying to do. Next up, I have a sponge in a plastic container. You could just use the sponge on its own or a wet paper towel. The only thing is the wet paper towel might have some fibres that come off of it. And the reason I'm using this is to clean my brushes properly in between paints. So if you clean it off with your water and then you wipe it on something like this, you'll get all that extra paint which is stuck in between the bristles. This is a method to clean your brush in between actually painting, so when you're changing over colours, it just makes sure all the paint's taken out of the brush. You can also make one of these as a substitute for a dampening pad, like the ones that Artis Opus sell. Next up I want to talk about brush control and the amount of paint you actually put on your brush. I will be doing a more in-depth video on this in the future, but I just wanted to give you a basic idea of it. Especially when you're trying to do more high-end painting like with glazes. So you don't want to put the paint directly onto your model. You want to get rid of some of the excess so you have more control over the paint. Just dab it off with some tissue paper. You can also check how thick or how thin your paint is by using the back of your thumbnail. And you can wipe away the excess here as well. You can also get this stuff called plastic card. And you can test out how the paint will look on this first before you put it onto your model. And this is also a great way to practice your brush control and how the paint works on models. I know this might seem a bit pointless and boring, but when you want to get into more high-end and refined painting, this will help you out loads as you practice your brush control and how paint works on layering. You can also airbrush onto this stuff as well to test it out before you put it on your model so it doesn't spider out everywhere. The last thing I have is the Humble plastic box, and these are great for a lot of different reasons. First of all, I want to talk about when you're clipping things off and then it flies off everywhere. If you have trouble with that, then clip the bits into a box or a shallow container. Plastic boxes with a sealable lid have loads of uses. So another thing I want to talk about is if you're working on a project and you don't want it to get dusty or damaged or any bits of glue or whatever on it, store it in one of these containers. Again, you can put some blue tack down or some double-sided sticky tape, and this is super helpful when you're working on display or competition miniatures. You can also transport your miniatures in boxes like this, and especially again for display or if you're going to a competition type of place. If you get a box like this and turn it upside down, or if it's big enough to fit it the other way, and then you can put some double-sided sticky tape in or some blue tack, or you can even use some magnets if you want to. You could even put some LED lights in this if you wanted to. Going back to the magnets I mentioned, you can buy some magnetic sheets and stickers, and you can put a whole army in a box like this for cheap instead of buying those overpriced ones. So I hope that video was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments below which one you'll be using, which ones you already use, and any others I've not mentioned which you think will be helpful. As always, thank you for watching. Remember to enjoy your hobbies for yourself. Respect that people enjoy them in their own ways, and at the end of the day, they're just war dollies. I'll see you in the next one.